Buckle up, Blue Jays Nation, because 2026 just went from zero to absolutely insane in the blink of an eye. The Toronto Blue Jays front office isn't playing around anymore. Folks, they're not just knocking on the door of championship contention. They're kicking it down with a sledgehammer. Breaking news that's sending shockwaves through the baseball world. Japanese superstar third baseman Kazuma Okamoto has officially agreed to join the Toronto Blue Jays on a multi-year free agent deal. That's right. The Jays just landed another international powerhouse. And this move is about to shake up everything we thought we knew about this roster heading into the new season. Now, before we dive deep into the absolute chaos this signing creates sand, trust me, we're talking about some serious roster gymnastics. Here, let's take a moment to appreciate just how spectacular this offseason has been for Toronto. We're talking about an organization that came within touching distance of a World Series championship and decided that getting close wasn't good enough. Instead of sitting back and making minor tweaks, Ross Atkins and the entire Blue Jays management team put their foot on the gas pedal and haven't let up for a single second. Think about what they've already accomplished this winter. The crown jewel of their offseason was landing Dylan Cease in a massive 7-year, $210 million blockbuster deal. That's not just adding a quality arm, that's making a statement to the entire American League that the Blue Jays are here to dominate. Then they brought back Shane Bieber, adding another proven veteran presence to an already formidable rotation. They didn't stop there either, signing Tyler Rogers and Cody Ponce to bolster the bullpen depth. And now, like the cherry on top of an already delicious sundae, Kazuma Okamoto joins the party while we're still waiting for the official contract details to drop because, let's be real, these things always take a minute to get finalized, and reported the smart money is on a deal somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 4 years with an average annual value hovering around $15 million. That's a reasonable investment for a player of Okamoto's caliber, especially when you consider what he brings to the table, both on and off the field. The financial commitment seems perfectly calculated to add significant value without handcuffing the organization's ability to make additional moves if opportunities present themselves. So who exactly is Kazuma, and why should Blue Jays fans be absolutely pumped about this signing? Let's break down what makes this Japanese sensation such an intriguing addition to an already loaded roster. Okamoto comes to Toronto after an exceptional 11-season career in Nippon professional baseball, where he established himself as one of the premier power hitters in the league. His career numbers tell the story of a consistently productive hitter, a lifetime batting average of .274, a .355 on-base percentage, a slugging percentage of .501, and an overall OPS of 8. Those are impressive numbers by any standard, but they become even more remarkable when you consider the level of competition he faced throughout his career in Japan. Now, some of you might be thinking about comparisons to another Japanese slugger who's been making waves in the baseball world. Here's the honest truth. Okamoto probably doesn't possess the same sky-high ceiling that Murakami does. Murakami is an absolute freak of nature when it comes to raw power, the kind of player who can change a game with one swing of the bat. But here's where it gets interesting, and why the Blue Jays might have actually made the smarter play here. While Murakami's power is undeniable, there are legitimate concerns about his plate discipline, his strikeout rates, and how all that swing and miss will translate against the superior pitching he'll face in Major League Baseball. Okamoto, on the other hand, offers something that might be even more valuable in the long run, a higher floor. What does that mean exactly? It means Okamoto has a better chance of sustained success in the majors because his game isn't built solely on raw power. He doesn't strike out excessively, which is absolutely crucial when facing the elite pitching staffs you encounter night after night in the American League. He also shows excellent plate discipline, drawing walks at a good rate and making consistent hard contact. From the right side of the plate, Okamoto provides legitimate pop combined with the kind of versatility that modern baseball teams covet. Speaking of versatility, this is where Okamoto really separates himself from other international imports. He's not a one-position wonder who needs everything built around him. This dude can play third base, first base, and even handle outfield duties when needed. Compare that to someone like Murakami, who projects more as a first baseman or designated hitter moving forward. And you start to see why the Blue Jays were so aggressive in pursuing Okamoto. In today's game, having players who can seamlessly shift between positions without a significant drop-off in defensive performance is worth its weight in gold. Let's talk about his most recent season, because even though injuries limited him to just 77 games, what he accomplished in that time was nothing short of spectacular. Okamoto absolutely raked. hitting .322 with a .411 on-base percentage and a .581 slugging percentage while launching 15 home runs. Extrapolate those numbers over a full 162-game season, and you're looking at potential for 30-plus ding. But if you really want to see what kind of power Serge Okamoto is capable of, just look back at his 2023 campaign, when he crushed 41 home runs over 140 games. That's legitimate middle-of-order production, the kind of power threat that opposing pitchers have to game plan around. Asterisk, here's something that should have Blue Jays fans even more excited. Okamoto is an aggressive pull hitter, and in the Rogers Center, that's going to play beautifully. When you break down his batted ball percentages, the numbers jump off the page. This past season, he posted a 47% pull rate. The year before that, it was 53%. Go back to 2023, and he was at 48%. Average those out, and you're looking at right around a 50% pull rate, which is well above the major league average. That matters tremendously, especially when you consider the park factors at Rogers Center. Over the last few years, Rogers Center has ranked 11th overall for right-handed hitters, with a park factor of 101. While it's not quite the launching pad that some other ballparks are, it's certainly not a pitcher's paradise either. For a right-handed power hitter who consistently pulls the ball like Okamoto does, this is actually an ideal situation. He's going to get plenty of opportunities to do damage, particularly against left-handed pitching, where his splits should be especially favorable. Now, let's address the elephant in the room more, should we say. The missing element in the Blue Jays' offensive attack this past season. Toronto fielded a very good offense overall, ranking among the league leaders in several key categories. But if there was one area where they could have used some improvement, it was definitely in the power department. The Blue Jays finished 13th overall in home runs last season, which isn't terrible by any means, but it's not where a championship-caliber team wants to be either. They had high hopes that Anthony Santander would provide that middle-of-border thump after signing him to a substantial deal. But unfortunately, he had an absolutely miserable season plagued by injuries and inconsistent performance. Enter Kazuma, who should provide exactly the kind of right-handed power boost this lineup desperately needs. If he can deliver even close to his projected production somewhere in the 25 to 30 home run range with consistent extra base hit production, that's going to make a massive difference in the run-scoring potential of this offense. Suddenly, opposing pitchers can't just pitch around the left-handed bats in the lineup because there's a legitimate power threat from the right side lurking in the middle of the order. But here's where things get absolutely fascinating, and frankly, a little bit complicated. The Okamoto signing creates some serious questions about the future of several other players in the organization, and it might signal some major changes coming to this roster. Let's start with the big one. What does this mean for Bo Bichette? Asterisk, if you look at the projected lineup that's currently posted on Fangraphs, they have Okamoto penciled in at third base. Given his versatility, he could theoretically play first base or left field as well. But the assumption right now is that third base is his primary position with the Blue Jays. So let's follow this logic through. If Okamoto is at third, you've got Vladimir Guerrero Jr. firmly entrenched at first base. That's not changing anytime soon. Ernie Clement is projected as the starting second baseman, and Andres Jimenez is slated to be the everyday shortstop. Suddenly, that infield is looking awfully crowded, and there's one very expensive, very talented player who doesn't seem to have a clear spot: Bo Bichette. Bo Bichette is unquestionably one of the top free agents available on the market right now. Throughout his entire career with the Blue Jays, he's been one of the most productive hitters in baseball, consistently delivering both power and average from a premium defensive position. Sure, he had a down year in 2020. Injuries will do that to you, but he bounced back in spectacular fashion this past season. We're talking about a guy who hit .311 with a .357 on-base percentage, a .483 slugging percentage, a .134 weighted runs created plus, and 18 home runs. Those are legitimate star-level numbers from a player who's still in his prime. But here's the problem that's been following Bo around throughout his career. His defense at shortstop has been, to put it kindly, a significant liability. He's consistently rated as one of the worst defensive shortstops in baseball. And as much as teams value his offensive production, there comes a point where you have to make a decision about whether the defensive deficiencies outweigh the offensive contributions. The best solution, and the one that's been discussed extensively throughout the industry, is moving Bichette to second base, where his defensive limitations would be less glaring and his offensive skills would still play up at the position. For the Blue Jays specifically, moving Andres Jimenez to shortstop makes all kinds of sense. Jimenez is an exceptional defender at short, the kind of player who can make all the routine plays while also flashing the ability to make spectacular grabs that save runs and change games. If the Blue Jays were to bring Bichette back, the logical move would be sliding him over to second base and letting Jimenez handle shortstop duties full-time. There have even been reports this offseason indicating that Bichette would be open to making that positional switch, which suggests his camp recognizes the reality of the situation. But if the Blue Jays do bring back Bo Bichette and move him to second base, what happens to Ernie Clement? This is where the domino effects of the Okamoto signing start cascading through the roster in interesting ways. Ernie Clement is nowhere near the offensive player that Bichette is. Let's be completely honest about that. But coming off a season where he hit .277 with a .313 on-base percentage, a .398 slugging percentage, a 98 weighted runs created plus, and 9 home runs, Clement showed he can be a serviceable offensive contributor. More importantly, he was absolutely phenomenal in the postseason, coming through in clutch situations time and time again and becoming something of a folk hero among Blue Jays fans. But here's what really makes Clement valuable: his defensive versatility and excellence. He put up a 3.2 wins above replacement this past season, and a huge chunk of that came from his glove work. Clement posted some of the best defensive metrics in all of baseball across multiple positions. He can play third base, second base, shortstop, and even handled some first base duties when needed. That kind of versatility is incredibly valuable for any roster, but especially for a team trying to maximize its depth and flexibility throughout a long season. Asterisk from a pure production standpoint, Clement's 3.2 wins above replacement compared very favorably to Bichette's 3.8, especially when you factor in the massive difference in salary expectations. Clement is going to be far cheaper than Bo Bichette, potentially by tens of millions of dollars over the life of their respective contracts. From a cold, hard financial perspective, you could argue that keeping Clement and letting Bichette walk makes a certain amount of sense. You're getting very similar production at a fraction of the cost, which then allows you to allocate those financial resources elsewhere on the roster. But baseball isn't played on spreadsheets, and there are intangible factors to consider as well. Clement has become something of the soul of this Blue Jays team, particularly after his postseason heroics. He's the glue guy, the player who does all the little things that don't always show up in the box score, but contribute to winning baseball. He's versatile, he's reliable, and he's beloved by his teammates and the fan base. Moving him to the bench or trading him away would be a difficult pill for many fans to swallow, especially after what he accomplished in the playoffs. So the question becomes, are the Blue Jays turning the page on the Bo Bichette era? It's starting to feel like a very real possibility, and the Okamoto signing might be the clearest indication yet that the front office is ready to move in a different direction. If they do decide to let Bichette walk in free agency, where does he end up? Several teams immediately jump to mind as potential landing spots. The Boston Red Sox have been mentioned constantly throughout the offseason as a potential destination for Bichette, and honestly, it makes a ton of sense. The Red Sox are still actively shopping for middle infield help, and they've been strongly connected to Alex Bregman as well. But if Bregman ends up signing elsewhere, and we'll talk about him in detail in just a minute, that could blow the doors wide open for Boston to make a serious run at Bichette. He'd be a perfect fit at Fenway Park, where his right-handed bat would feast on the green monster. Plus, there's a fun bit of personal history here. Bo's parents actually met just outside Fenway Park, so there's a sentimental connection to the ballpark and the city. Bichette has absolutely terrorized the Red Sox throughout his career, consistently putting up huge numbers against them in head-to-head matchups. The old saying goes, if you can't beat him, join him, and maybe that's exactly what ends up happening here. The Red Sox have been somewhat hesitant to hand out long-term deals to players in their 30s, which could work in their favor when negotiating with Bichette, who's still relatively young and in his prime years. They could potentially get him on a shorter deal than someone like Alex Bregman would command, given the age difference between the two players. Asterisk, but don't sleep on the Los Angeles Dodgers as a potential landing spot for Bo Bichette either. As of right now, the Dodgers have Ha-Seong Kim penciled in as their starting second baseman after signing him last offseason. But Kim didn't exactly light the world on fire in his first year with the organization. He spent some time in the minor leagues and never really established himself as an everyday player at the big league level. Could the Dodgers pivot and use Kim more as a utility player who bounces around to different positions while Bichette becomes their everyday second baseman? It would certainly be ironic given that Bichette hit that devastating 3-run homer against the Dodgers in Game 7 of the World Series. Sometimes the best revenge is turning your enemies into allies, and the Dodgers have never been shy about opening up their checkbook to add elite talent. They've got the financial resources to make it happen, and they're always looking for ways to improve even after winning back-to-back championships. Adding Bichette would give them another dynamic, offensive weapon in a lineup that's already stacked with all-stars. The Chicago Cubs are another team that's shown interest in upgrading their middle infield, particularly with all the Alex Bregman buzz we've been hearing. But if Bregman isn't in the cards for Chicago, maybe they pivot to Bichette as their plan B now. Fitting him into their roster would require some creative maneuvering. Nico Hoerner is currently entrenched at second base, and he's been a solid contributor for several years. Maybe they explore trading Hoerner to open up the position, or perhaps they move him to a different spot on the infield. Matt Shaw, their top prospect, could shift into a utility role or potentially be included in a trade package to address other needs. Christopher Morel could slide over to third base in certain scenarios. The point is, if the Cubs really want Bichette, they could find a way to make it work. The San Francisco Giants are another franchise to keep an eye on. They've got a pretty clean opening at second base right now, with Casey Schmidt currently projected as the starter. Schmidt was a second-round pick about 5 years ago, but he didn't do much of anything this past season to inspire confidence that he's ready for an everyday role. If the Giants want to upgrade, and they should, Bichette would be a massive improvement. The question is whether they're willing to spend the money to make it happen. The Giants have been aggressive in pursuing big-name free agents over the past few years, but they haven't always been willing to be the highest bidder. Still, with Buster Posey now in the front office, maybe we see a more aggressive approach to roster construction. Never count out the Giants in any free agent sweepstakes. Now let's talk about Alex Bregman, because his situation is intrinsically linked to all of this. The Blue Jays have been prominently mentioned as a potential destination for Bregman throughout this entire offseason, but the Okamoto signing probably takes them out of the running. I mean, theoretically, you could still make it work. Have Bregman play third base and slide Okamoto out to left field, but that starts getting complicated pretty quickly. You'd have to figure out what to do with Anthony Santander, who the Blue Jays just signed to a significant deal last offseason. Despite his horrendous performance this past year, they're almost certainly going to give him another opportunity to be an everyday player and justify that investment. And then, what happens to Addison Barger, who showed promise in his limited playing time? It just creates too many roster headaches. So the Blue Jays are indeed out on Bregman. That leaves two teams as the primary contenders: the Boston Red Sox and the Arizona Diamondbacks. For the Red Sox, this might be the perfect opportunity to finally land their big fish. With a division rival like Toronto potentially out of the bidding, Boston doesn't have to worry about getting into a bidding war with a team that has unlimited resources. We've talked extensively about how perfect a fit Bregman would be, both on and off the field for Boston. He's a clutch performer, a proven winner with championship experience, and he brings exactly the kind of right-handed power bat they desperately need in their lineup. Recent reports from Buster Olney suggest the Red Sox have made an aggressive offer, so this might finally be coming together after weeks of speculation. The Arizona Diamondbacks have the home field advantage in any Bregman sweepstakes. He owns a house in Arizona, has family in New Mexico, and operates a baseball training program in the area. During the offseason, those personal connections matter, especially for a player in his 30s who might be looking for his last big contract. If the Diamondbacks can figure out how to fit his salary into their payroll structure, and that's a significant if, they have to be considered serious contenders. But this feels like it's going to come down to Boston and Arizona, barring some surprise team jumping into the mix at the last minute. And then there's Kyle Tucker, who might be the most interesting domino of all in this complex chess match. The Blue Jays have been aggressively pursuing Tucker throughout the offseason, and at various points they've been labeled as favorites to land him. The market for Tucker has been surprisingly quiet, with only a handful of teams seriously connected to him. The Blue Jays, the Dodgers, the Mets, the Orioles at one point before they signed Pete Alonso, and the Phillies before they brought in Adolis Garcia. The point is, there's not exactly a feeding frenzy for one of the premier outfielders in baseball, which is frankly shocking for the Blue Jays. Tucker still feels like a natural fit despite the Okamoto signing. Why? Because Tucker is an outfielder, not an infielder. You could bring him in as an upgrade over Addison Barger without having to completely reshape your infield alignment. The question is, what happens to Barger in that scenario? Does he get moved in a trade? Does he shift into a utility role? Those are decisions the front office would have to make. but they're manageable problems to solve. Could you imagine Kyle Tucker in this Blue Jays lineup? We're talking about an absolutely devastating collection of offensive talent. Picture this batting order. George Springer leading off, Kyle Tucker in the 2-hole, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. hitting third, Kazuma Okamoto providing right-handed thump in the cleanup spot, and Anthony Santander assuming he bounces back to his previous form, hitting fifth. Even the bottom of the order would be scary, with guys like Ernie Clement, Andres Kim, and Alejandro Kirk capable of doing damage. That's a lineup that could lead the American League in runs scored and give opposing pitchers nightmares for 6 months. Asterisk UT, do the Blue Jays actually land Tucker? That's the million-dollar question. And honestly, it's tough to say. Tucker is reportedly looking for at least a 10-year contract, which makes sense given his age and track record of elite performance. But would the Blue Jays be willing to go that far, especially when it doesn't seem like they're in a bidding war with multiple teams? There's something to be said for not outbidding yourself when the market hasn't developed the way everyone expected. Maybe they try to find a middle ground on a shorter deal with opt-outs that give both sides flexibility. But that's pure speculation at this point. If the Blue Jays don't end up landing Tucker, where does he go? The Dodgers remain an intriguing possibility. And honestly, it's one that's been discussed extensively throughout the offseason. Yes, they just won their second consecutive World Series championship. But if there's one area where they could still improve, it's the outfield. Michael Conforto was a complete bust this past season. And while they've got Andy Pages, Tommy Edman, and Teoscar Hernandez currently projected in the starting outfield, there's definitely room for an upgrade. The beauty of adding Tucker to the Dodgers is that Tommy Edman could shift back to second base, where he's played extensively throughout his career. Pages could move to center field, and Tucker would patrol left field. It's a perfect fit defensively, and it would give the Dodgers yet another superstar bat in an already loaded lineup. Here's where it gets really interesting. There have been reports suggesting the Dodgers would be open to a short-term deal for Tucker. If his market doesn't develop the way he's hoping, why not take a 1 or 2 year deal with opt-outs to play for a championship contender, make a ton of money, and then test free agency again after the next collective bargaining agreement is settled? It's not the worst idea in the world, especially if the alternative is signing a longer deal for less annual value than you think you're worth. Asterisk, the New York Mets are another team that can't be counted out of the Tucker sweepstakes. They've made numerous subtractions this offseason, losing Pete Alonso, Edwin Diaz, Brandon Nimmo, and Jeff McNeil while making smaller additions like Jorge Polanco, Marcus Semien, Luke Weaver, and Devin Williams. It still feels like they need to make another splash move to truly compete in the National League East. They could have an opening in the outfield depending on how they value Carson Benjamin, their highly regarded prospect, who could be ready for the big leagues sooner rather than later. But as currently constructed, Tyrone Taylor is projected as their starting center fielder, which feels like an area ripe for an upgrade. John Heyman recently reported that the Mets have checked in on Tucker's availability, which suggests at least some level of interest from Steve Cohen and the front office. Could this be connected to the Blue Jays signing Okamoto? Is there a scenario where Toronto's addition of the Japanese third baseman signals they're moving in a different direction, thereby opening the door for the Mets to swoop in? It's an interesting thought. And given that the Mets have essentially unlimited financial resources thanks to Cohen's deep pockets, they could absolutely go toe-to-toe with any team in a bidding war for Tucker's services. And this might be the most boring possibility. Maybe Kyle Tucker just goes back to the Chicago Cubs on a short-term deal. It wouldn't be the most exciting outcome. But if his market truly doesn't develop and he's not getting the long-term offers he's hoping for, why not run it back with a team he's familiar with for another year or two? He'd get to bet on himself, likely earn a substantial annual salary even on a shorter deal, and then hit free agency again when circumstances might be more favorable. It's not a sexy outcome, but it's a pragmatic one that makes sense for both player and team in certain scenarios. Here's what we know for certain. The Blue Jays should not be counted out for either Kyle Tucker or bringing back Bo Bichette. Ross Atkins and company have shown throughout this entire offseason that they're willing to be aggressive, make bold moves, and spend money to improve the roster. But if they pursue either Tucker or Bichette, or potentially both, though that seems unlikely, they're going to have to make corresponding roster moves, whether that's moving Ernie Clement, trading Addison Barger, or something else entirely that hasn't been leaked to the media yet. There will be consequences that ripple through the organization. The financial flexibility still exists for the Blue Jays to make another major addition. The Okamoto contract, whatever it ends up being, likely comes in at a very reasonable number, that doesn't significantly impact their ability to spend elsewhere. If they really wanted to make one final push, adding someone like Tucker would put them over the top as legitimate World Series favorites. The same could be said for bringing back Bichette, though that creates more positional complications given the current roster construction. Asterisk. What makes the Okamoto signing such a smart move is that it addresses a clear need right-handed power in the middle of the order without requiring a massive financial commitment. It's the kind of signing that flies under the radar because it's not a nine-figure deal for a household name, but it could end up being one of the most important moves the Blue Jays made this entire winter. Okamoto provides a high floor, meaning the risk of a complete bust is relatively low. Even if he doesn't hit 40 home runs like he did in 2023, getting 20 to 25 dingers with solid defense at multiple positions represents excellent value for the investment. The versatility factor cannot be overstated enough. When Vladimir Guerrero Jr. needs a rest day, Okamoto can slide over to first base. If they want to give Addison Barger a breather in the outfield, Okamoto can handle left field duties without being a complete liability out there. And obviously, third base remains his primary position, where his combination of offensive production and adequate defense makes him a valuable everyday player. Modern roster construction prioritizes these kinds of multi-positional players because they provide coverage across the diamond without requiring additional roster spots. As a right-handed hitter, Okamoto also gives manager John Schneider more flexibility when setting his lineup against left-handed starting pitchers. The Blue Jays have plenty of left-handed bats in their lineup, but having another legitimate right-handed power threat allows them to stay balanced regardless of who's on the mound for the opposition. That might not seem like a huge deal over the course of a single game, but over 162 games, it adds up to significant run production and offensive consistency. Let's step back and appreciate just how incredible this entire offseason has been for the Toronto Blue Jays. This is an organization that came agonizingly close to winning the World Series, falling just short of the ultimate goal. A lot of teams in that position might take a conservative approach, maybe make a few minor tweaks around the edges, and run it back with essentially the same roster. Not the Blue Jays. They looked at how close they came and decided that being close wasn't good enough. They wanted to get better, and they've done exactly that. The Dylan Cease signing was the headline grabber, the move that made everyone around baseball sit up and take notice. 7 years and $210 million for one of the best pitchers in the game. That's championship-level ambition right there. Bringing back Shane Bieber added another proven veteran to the rotation, giving them incredible depth and multiple guys who can dominate opposing lineups. The bullpen additions of Tyler Rogers and Cody Ponce might not get as much attention, but relief pitching wins championships, and having quality arms in the late innings is crucial. And now, Okamoto joins the party as the final piece, or maybe not the final piece if they're still cooking up another move behind the scenes of an offseason that will be remembered as one of the most aggressive and successful in Blue Jays history. This is a franchise that's all in on winning right now, and you have to respect that level of commitment from the front office and ownership. The beauty of the Okamoto signing is that it doesn't close any doors. The Blue Jays still have the financial flexibility to make another big move if the right opportunity presents itself. They could still bring back Bo Bichette if they decide his bat is too valuable to lose, and they can work out a reasonable contract. They could still pursue Kyle Tucker if they think adding another elite outfielder puts them over the top. The options remain open, which is exactly where you want to be as a contending team heading into spring training. There's also something to be said for the message this offseason sends to the rest of the roster and the fan base. The Blue Jays are telling everyone, players, fans, opponents, that they're serious about winning championships. They're not content with being pretty good or making the playoffs and hoping for the best. They want to be the best, and they're backing up that ambition with action. That kind of organizational commitment can have a galvanizing effect on a clubhouse, creating a culture where everyone believes they're playing for something special. For fans who have been waiting decades to see another World Series championship parade roll through downtown Toronto, this offseason has to feel incredibly validating. Finally, ownership is opening up the checkbook. Finally, the front office is making aggressive moves to improve the roster. Finally, it feels like everything is aligned for a legitimate championship run. The pieces are in place, the talent is undeniable, and the window is wide open right now. Looking ahead to the 2026 season, this Blue Jays roster is absolutely stacked from top to bottom. The starting rotation features multiple aces who can shut down any opponent. The lineup is balanced with a mix of left-handed and right-handed power, contact hitters, and free swingers, veterans, and young stars. The bullpen has been reinforced with quality arms who can get outs in high-leverage situations. The defense should be solid up the middle with Andres Jimenez at short and improvements elsewhere on the diamond. Every aspect of this roster has been addressed and upgraded. The American League East remains one of the toughest divisions in baseball, with the Yankees, Orioles, Red Sox, and Rays all capable of making playoff runs. But when you look at the Blue Jays roster on paper and compare it to anyone else in the division, it's hard not to like their chances. They've got the starting pitching to match up against anyone. They've got the offensive firepower to outscore opponents in high-scoring games. They've got the veteran leadership and postseason experience to handle the pressure of meaningful September baseball. All the pieces are in place for something special. Asterisk, of course, nothing is guaranteed in baseball. Injuries can derail even the best-laid plans. Players can underperform their projections. Young guys who look like stars might struggle with the adjustment to everyday big league life. The baseball gods are fickle, and sometimes things just don't break your way no matter how good your roster looks on paper. But you can only control what you can control. And the Blue Jays have controlled their offseason about as well as any team in baseball. The Kazuma Okamoto signing represents the kind of smart, calculated risk that successful franchises make. It's not a panic move or an overpay for a declining veteran. It's bringing in a player in his prime who fills a specific need at a reasonable price, while maintaining flexibility for future moves. That's smart roster construction, and it's exactly what you want to see from your front office. So where do the Blue Jays go from here? Do they make one more big splash and bring in Kyle Tucker or Bo Bichette? Do they stand pat with what they've got and trust that the current roster is good enough to win it all? Do they make smaller moves around the margins to add depth and address specific weaknesses? Only Ross Atkins and his staff know the answer to those questions. But one thing is crystal clear. This offseason has been an unqualified success regardless of what happens next. The foundation has been laid. The roster has been upgraded. The message has been sent. Now it's time for the players to go out and finish the job that came so close to completion last season with the additions of Dylan Cease, Shane Bieber, Tyler Rogers, Cody Ponce, and now Kazuma Okamoto. The Blue Jays have given themselves every possible advantage heading into 2026. The rest is up to them. Blue Jays Nation, get ready for what could be the most exciting season in franchise history. This team is loaded, this roster is deep, and this front office isn't done fighting to bring a championship back to Toronto. The Okamoto signing might have flown under the radar compared to some of the other moves this winter, but don't sleep on what it means for this lineup. Adding a legitimate right-handed power threat who can play multiple positions and doesn't strike out excessively is exactly the kind of move that championship teams make. The American League better be on notice, because the Toronto Blue Jays are coming, and they're bringing an arsenal of weapons that would make any opponent nervous. From the top of the rotation to the bottom of the lineup, this team is built to win right now. The window is open, the roster is ready, and the time is now. Let's see if they can finally get over the hump and bring home the hardware that this franchise and this fan base have been dreaming about for so long. What an absolutely incredible offseason this has been. The Blue Jays have addressed every weakness, reinforced every strength, and positioned themselves as legitimate World Series favorites heading into the new season. Whether they make one more move or stand pat with what they've got, this roster is championship caliber from top to bottom. Now we just have to wait for spring training to start so we can see this team in action and begin the journey toward what we all hope will be a historic championship run. Asterisk. So Blue Jays fans, what do you think? Are you fired up about the Okamoto signing? Do you think the team should make one more big move, or is this roster good enough as currently constructed? Should they bring back Bo Bichette or let him walk and trust in Ernie Clement? Should they go all-in on Kyle Tucker and make one final splash? Drop your thoughts in the comments section below because we want to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this breakdown of the Okamoto signing and everything it means for the Blue Jays moving forward, smash that like button and help us get to 60,000 subscribers by opening day. We're on a mission to build the best Blue Jays community on YouTube, and we need your help to get there. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. And share this video with your fellow Blue Jays fans who need to know about this incredible offseason. The Blue Jays are cooking, folks, and we're going to be here covering every single move, every rumor, every development as this championship caliber roster comes together. This is the most exciting time to be a Blue Jays fan in decades, and we're just getting started. Until next time, this is Jays or Nothing, and remember, championship glory